Yeah, I find titles pretty difficult. A History of Burning wasn't the title for like most of those years that I was working on the book, but I never landed on a title that felt good. Um, and then I just thought of the History of Burning like towards the end of when I was working on the book. I think I wanted a title that sort of captured like the scope of the book because it contains 100 years and just a lot of like big moments in history. Um, and so I wanted to capture that sort of like breadth and scope, and at the same time, um, burning fires. That's like a huge motif in the book. It comes up over and over from the very first chapter until the end. And I think for me, I was thinking a lot about the idea of burning and how it's something that is, we usually think of it as something that's violent or destructive,
Mhm.
which it very much can be, but also how a burning can be something um, regenerative, like a controlled burn of a forest to generate new growth. And sometimes, like the necessity of burning something to the ground to allow something new to come up. And I think that the novel really holds both of those ideas, the sort of violence and destruction, and also the growth and the possibility. Um, so it felt right when I found it. So yeah, I think for me, what sort of kept it moving along was, um, first of all, I believed in the project. I felt a sense of purpose and a sense of urgency with this project that I'd never felt with anything I'd tried to write before. Um, and I think that's because it's a very personal story. Felt very connected to me, to my family, to my ancestry, to things I wanted to understand. Um, and so that was like the biggest thing that kept me going. And then as I started getting further along, I found other ways to keep myself accountable, I guess, which was like finding a writing community. And I had a couple of just close, trusted friends who are also writers, and we would meet once a month and exchange. And we were all working on different sorts of projects, and we would just exchange like a chapter or an essay or a story. So every month, and it was very low stakes, um, but every month I knew I had to get something out. And so that kept me going for like definitely some years. I think a combination of that accountability slash community and just like the meaning, how it was a meaningful project to me. Um, that's what helped me get it done. I sort of did. I did and I didn't. So I felt at the start that I wanted to try to write a novel that didn't have one protagonist. That was something I set out to do because I wanted to see if I could write a novel where the family was the protagonist, um, and that each individual member of the family was, held equal weight. Um, I was really interested in the ways that, just as a protagonist in another novel would have their own arc, that the family of this novel has an arc, right? And at the same time, every individual member of the family also has their own individual arcs, and sometimes those rub up against each other. They come into conflict. There's tension. They're not necessarily, wanting to go in the same way, and that was interesting to me. I think that's sort of my experience of family. I think that's a lot of our experience of family. That sort of entanglement, that enmeshment, and that love, and at the same time, this sort of like push and pull. Um, so that is what I wanted to do. Um, at the same time, when I started writing the novel, I started writing it in a different perspective, which is third person omniscient. So I'm much more sort of zoomed out, godlike narrator. Um, and I was doing that because a lot of the multi generational novels, a lot of them are written like that, with that sort of voice, and that I really looked up to those books, and so I had started out writing in that way. Um, But there was one day I remember, I had a couple of hours on a Saturday to write, and I went to a coffee shop. I sat down, and this whole chapter just kind of dropped out of me in a couple of hours. And it was a chapter. It was the first chapter that came out in third person close, which is how the book is written now. So where each character has a chapter where you're only in their mind and perspective. And it was, the chapter was Rajni 1947, which is a very sort of like pivotal, important chapter. And that was such a different experience writing that, because I felt, I understood something about the book. I understood that I could sort of drop down into a single moment. And that chapter takes place in 1947, which, politically, historically, is a very explosive moment in India, where the characters were in that chapter. And yet I was able to drop down and sort of embody this one person, and not only, be bringing in those sort of bigger political moments and histories, but also like being really attuned again to the small, and the minute and the intimate, between the character and their family and those around them, and it just felt much more embodied, much more interior, in a way that I really loved and connected with. And so that chapter sort of taught me how the book needed to be written. And so then I went back and rewrote what I had already written in that way, in third person close, from the different family members' perspectives. And then that's sort of how I wrote forward from that point.